Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our ISIS webinar, Adapting to COVID-19, Malaysian Foreign Policy Priorities for the New World. I'm Izzah Ibrahim, a researcher in ISIS Malaysia, and I will be the moderator for this session alongside my co-host, Mr. Thomas Daniel. It's been a while, but this is one of our few hybrid events in quite a while. But rest assured during the session that we at ISIS Malaysia are ensuring all SOPs are being followed to the best of our ability. For now, I will invite Mr. Harizal Hazri, Chief Executive of ISIS Malaysia, to deliver the welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Izzah. Thank you, everyone, for joining online. First of all, it is my deepest pleasure this morning. We are very happy to have Yang Berhormat Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, Foreign Minister of Malaysia, to be together with us. Indeed, this is something that, at ISIS, we feel that this is a great commitment from both ISIS side as well as Wisma Putra to speak to the larger audience about foreign policy direction, so on and so forth. I would also like to welcome my colleagues, all of them around the table, Dr. Roy, Dr. Chuping, and also Dr. Anis. And thank you very much for being here today at ISIS. I would also like to mention that this is the first time that we are holding a conference at the ISIS, or a webinar at the ISIS building. And we are very happy that that first time is marked by the presence of our foreign minister. So I wouldn't want to be too formal. I think the content is more important of our discussion this morning. Therefore, that's my short opening remarks. And again, I thank everyone for participating this morning. Back to you, Izzah.
Thank you, Mr. Harizal. So I will be describing the format of the event for today. Each of our speakers will be invited to make their initial remarks for up to about 15 minutes. Then after that, we'll be dedicating to about an hour of discussion and Q&A that will be taking place. Also, participants, you are more than welcome to use the Q&A window in Zoom to ask your questions or provide any comments. But do note that this is separate from the chat window, so keep in mind when you do post anything. Or if you do want to verbally ask your questions to any of the panelists, you can use the raise your hand function. And also in the interest of time and to ensure we can get as much participation as possible by anybody interested, please do keep your questions and comments succinct. And us co-moderators will cue the speakers if we find any particular questions or comments relevant. And for a time like this is quite important to have this sort of session, because we've come to realize that we need to move beyond the immediate efforts of pandemic relief and realize that in such a globalized world, we need to be leveraging on this connectivity that we have. And one of the important considerations is to make sure we use our foreign policy and our diplomacy to set those priorities. And with that, I will be inviting our first speaker, Yang Berhormat Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, Minister of Foreign Affairs, to provide his remarks. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and salam sejahtera, Saudara Harizal and panel speakers, brothers and sisters. Alhamdulillah, I'm very happy to be back in ISIS, and I must congratulate Saudara Harizal and the team. The building looks much nicer than the last time I visited, like 2 years ago or so, or more than 2 years ago. And ISIS plays a very significant role in providing inputs, in fact, in advising the government on our foreign policy. There was a time when ISIS was really very, very instrumental. And I would like to see ISIS coming back to that role. There was a time when the Prime Minister would not embark on anything new on foreign policy without discussing with ISIS. Those were the days of Allahyarham Nordin Sopi. And when I came back this time to Wisma Putra, I saw that ISIS has started on the right track to come back to that stature of importance in advising the government. And I really look forward to working with Harizal and the team and looking forward to, well, of course, better things in as far as our foreign policy is concerned. I must thank ISIS and Harizal for organizing this webinar today. I know this is something that we organized at the last minute, partly on my asking. The minister has his way of influencing people, but I would like to think that this is very important for a couple of reasons, but mainly because we are now, we have now a new government under Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri, and I thought that it is only proper that we relook at some of our policies on foreign policy, look at the priorities that we have to do now, and hence the topic of today's webinar, adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic, and then what do we do after that? We know that on the cabinet side, there is this Majlis Pembangunan Semula, Pemulihan Negara, Majlis Pemulihan Negara, which is now chaired by former Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin. So that is the government initiative, but foreign policy has to come together with what the government is trying to do. And while Tan Sri Muhyiddin is thinking now about, I spoke to him yesterday, while he is now thinking about appointing people to the Majlis and revisiting some of the things that he was doing when he was Prime Minister. And so the timing is like a perfect coincidence. We need to look at foreign policy while the government is also looking at the economics, the business, the trade, and so on and so forth. I formed the Foreign Policy Consultative Council, where Harizal is a member. We had our first meeting last Friday, and we are supposed to have our second meeting somewhere next week. The idea is to come up with a framework. I use the term framework so that it is more generic rather than saying it is like a Bible kind of thing. But it is a framework of foreign policy. My thinking is the framework should be divided into two major components. The first component is really needs no introduction to people who are familiar with foreign policy, because foreign policy, our foreign policy, basically don't change. The fundamentals remain the same. ASEAN remain the central or the cornerstone of our foreign policy. Economic diplomacy is very much on top of the agenda. South China Sea is important. The OIC, and we want to be friends with all countries. We want to be active on the multilateral platforms, the UN, the NAM, the OIC, and whatnot. Though we do have to look at priorities depending on what is in front of us today and tomorrow. And we want to continue to speak on behalf of the oppressed, of the Mustadafin of the world, of the Rohingyas, of the Palestinians and whatnot. So those remain the same. So the first component really that won't take time to write or to rewrite rather. And the only thing we need to do at that component is probably some short-term priorities or focus. Yeah. Even on some of the traditional issues, we have to look at, again, on maritime, what is the real thing? I've been reminded by Harizal, it's not just South China Sea. There are other seas that are very important. I think he has a point. We had a good chit chat this morning on the sea surrounding Malaysia. And on the non-traditional threat, probably more focus now on cybersecurity, for example. But otherwise, on that component, I think it's no rocket science. We know exactly what we have been doing and what we should be doing. The second component is the actual focus and priorities, probably for now and for the very near future. Now, as we are facing the COVID-19, and the near future is really post-COVID. So we are looking at probably what, 2 to 3 to 4 years kind of, and the time is very much defined by the pandemic rather than anything else. And then we have to look at, and that is why I'm toying with the idea of health diplomacy as something of great importance for now. We have been talking about vaccine, but I think health diplomacy is where government and non-state actors look at global policy solutions to actually improve global health. And pandemic happens to be one of the challenges, and COVID-19 is the real story for the day, and vaccine is something that is important. But then we look at a new dynamic of things when it comes to vaccine. So you have a new donor country, a new recipient country, not based on the post-war or post-Cold War arrangement. Now you have different donor, different way of looking at donor countries and different way of looking at recipient. And suddenly our MTCP includes probably our role in providing vaccine assistance and health equipment assistance. And probably IDFR have to look at, if you are looking at post-COVID, then training in public health and so on and so forth. So we are bringing together several disciplines under health diplomacy: public health, international affairs, management law, economics, trade policy, and so on and so forth. And if in the normal arrangement, or rather the understanding on international arrangement, where we have superpowers and middle powers and developing countries, now we have super producers of vaccine, people looking for a new third world country looking for vaccine donations because they can't afford to buy. If you have the P5, we have the big pharma. So it's another story. So if you think it is difficult to make decision at the Security Council, then you will have Russian complaining about why Sputnik is not what you call endorsed probably by many countries, or by what. So this thing is happening right in front of us, and to my mind, health diplomacy will have to address that. And for the interest of Malaysia, it is not just about vaccine, it is about science, it's about research, and also about business. Pardon me for saying that. I'm not trying to say that we take opportunity out of problems that the world is facing, but to be practical, Pharma Niaga is the local company for Sinovac. And I understand that already there are some discussion to further the relation with China or the company related to Sinovac beyond just the vaccine. And it is really an opportunity for trade in the future in certain areas. And there is this meeting between diplomats and health experts. Diplomats have to learn on matters pertaining to health. And our health officers have to start learning also matters pertaining to foreign policy. So it's like a merge of two very distinct disciplines or professionals, the health and the diplomats. And I can see that they are working very closely together. So that is one major focus. But besides that, and we can discuss this here and or even in other discussions. I've been toying with the idea that among other priorities will be, of course, the SDGs implementation. We are taking the SDGs very seriously. On the 27th of this month, the Prime Minister will be launching the 12 Malaysia plan. It is our, well, the 12 Malaysia plan is a 12 Malaysia plan, but in a way it is our interpretation to localize, if you like, the SDGs, or not to nationalize, to localize the SDGs. And then there is this, I think we also have to look at peaceful coexistence in the context of multilateralism. I'm sure many people are quite happy that at least the President of the United States, at least today, looks like he is more inclined to this idea of strengthening multilateral relations rather than making unilateral decisions. But P5 being P5, US being US, we know how they react to things and how they do things. And then there is this issue on digital investment or digital economy investment. Partly because of COVID, we are looking at how everyone is now on board with, as in telecommunication and ICT and communication, multimedia and what have you. I think we should seize that opportunity. We have launched the My Digital initiative, but when it comes to foreign investment on digital economy, this is something that we have to work hard. The last point is, or the last focus area is cultural diplomacy. But if I may underline my understanding of cultural diplomacy, it is not just about sending dancers and singers overseas. It's not limited to tourism. I think we have to look at civilization. It's more civilizational. It's more high culture, if you like. Bukanlah kelas kayangan or cluster kayangan, but I think you understand where I'm coming from. It's not just about dance and songs and you know, film. Yes, we want to win Oscar, we want to win Grammy. By all means, we need to do that. But I think here we are looking at, and Malaysia has the moral to talk about this because we are ourselves, you know, a country where different cultures actually meet. And this has relation to peaceful coexistence and so on. So we at Wisma Putra, and greatly assisted by Harizal and the team in ISIS, we are trying to come up with that framework within these few weeks. So I can only say that our discussion, again, if I may repeat, our discussion today is very, very important for me, at least personally, but also I think for many of the things that we are doing already, and many of the things that we would want to do better in the near future. So Izzah, that would be my opening intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, YB, for a very good opener for the session, especially in explaining how we should be recontextualizing our priorities, especially in the non-traditional elements of foreign policy and focusing on Malaysia's own development. Next, I will be inviting Mr. Harizal Hazri, our Chief Executive of ISIS Malaysia, to provide his initial remarks.
Thank you, Izzah. Thank you again, Yang Berhormat Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah. It's very difficult to speak after Datuk Saifuddin because there's nothing much I can say. It's already all been greatly covered. I think that was really a very good opener, setting the context for our conversation this morning. I'd just like to add on a couple of things, maybe a few things, a bit more than just two. First of all, I think it's very important for us to understand that when we talk about post-COVID, it is not a destination, it is a journey. Post-COVID world is not going to be a static world. In fact, I would argue that the post-COVID world is even going to be more fluid than we could ever imagine. Now, one thing that the virus has taught us, that number one, we need to operate in a slightly different way, if I may, to rethink about some of the things that, or how we have been doing things, and really to harmonize it with what the future is going to be. I quite frankly think that the old ways of doing things would be over, or is already indeed over. And we need to really focus on putting all of our minds together to plan and to execute well of what this might mean for our country. Now, I really like to latch on to something Datuk Saifuddin mentioned earlier about multidisciplinary approach. In the post-COVID world, this is going to be extremely important. Not just the doctors or the public health experts are going to be very involved in sharing of information or public health initiatives, or even in ensuring that the allocations of vaccines are provided to every part of the world, because we know that no one is safe until everyone is safe. But in order for us to do that, countries need to come together in an extremely multidisciplinary approach, bringing different backgrounds to really contribute to ensure that we achieve these objectives. Now, this is really part of the G's at ISIS. And I think even since the beginning, ISIS has been extremely multidisciplinary. And I welcome more thoughts and more involvements from everyone, notwithstanding what background you have. You could be a doctor, you could be an engineer, public health experts. I think we all need to contribute in many different ways to ensure that this beloved nation that we believe in will be able to continue to flourish and prosper, as well as remain competitive in the international arena. So that's one point. The second point really is to look at this whole digital world that we are talking about. Malaysia was definitely one of the first countries among equals, among the at that time developing nations, who really had a vision of how we want to place our country and our sectors and our economy in what was then thought the future, the digital world. Now we are living already in the future. And in fact, we should today become one of the leaders. And this is through my engagement with Datuk Saifuddin, and we will continue to support Datuk Saifuddin in this agenda, which I truly believe in. We need to strengthen Malaysia's position, especially on the opportunities as well as some of the challenges. When talking about the opportunities, we have to look at digital trade as a viable space where economy can flourish, where new ideas can be turned into sustainable business ventures, where young people in Malaysia can participate with less barriers. We need to really think about how to promote this. Ministry of Foreign Affairs is definitely one component of it, But through that, I think to the larger sort of like context of different ministries in Malaysia as well, we have to also understand that this is coming from the backdrop of having signed or being part of the RCEP, which is the world's largest free trade agreement. There are lots of opportunities there for young people, young businesses, small businesses to big businesses in Malaysia. But we need to really strengthen our digital capacity and explore the areas where these businesses can flourish. I think if we can fully realize the platform of RCEP, we can move forward and become stronger as a nation that is totally able to compete in the digital world. Now, that comes also at the back of some negotiations that's still continuing on TCTPP, as well as other already relevant and current opportunities that is part of APEC. And Malaysia is definitely a very strong player, a very strong nation, strong supporter in APEC. And I think under Dato' Saifuddin, we can look at areas of how we can merge this and think about those opportunities that we have in international trade to strengthen Malaysia's position globally. But that also comes with some challenges. And I'd like to highlight one challenge that Dato' Saifuddin has already mentioned, which is cybersecurity. And this is something that we are very involved in at ISIS. We are very invested in cybersecurity. And we really like to think about how Malaysia can really be part of a nation that is crafting approaches for cybersecurity instead of being a nation that is becoming a target of cyber insecurity. So that's one important thing that I wanted to bring on to the conversation this morning. And finally, of course, there are many other points that I'm pretty sure my colleagues will also bring to the table. But finally is to really talk about the context that our foreign minister has mentioned earlier on cultural diplomacy. Now, a lot of people seems to look at cultural diplomacy as to be something that is probably less relevant because maybe the connotations of the word culture in itself. But really, quite amazingly, cultural diplomacy has always been one of the most important and effective tools for any country in the world to strengthen its position and some of the things that they believe in. For Malaysia, we already have that background. We have a strong reputation internationally. And we have, just like rightly mentioned or pointed out by Dato' Saifuddin, that we have the G's of what a multicultural society or community should look like. We have our own challenges, but so far we've been managing it, we've been going through it, and we are maturing day by day to become a more unified society. Now with that, I think we need to translate cultural diplomacy, something looking at our history, the heritage that we bring, and the contribution that we can bring based on that to the international community. And this encompasses issues ranging from traditional security and even non-traditional security today, as well as some of our experiences promoting peace and coexistence in the region as well as the world, like the initiatives that we have done so well in Mindanao, parts of our approach in southern Thailand, our continuous engagements in Palestine and the Middle East, as well as the approaches that we have been taking, and we are definitely going to think about and do continuously with troubled nations like or challenged nations like Afghanistan, so on and so forth. So we have a lot of experience, and we need to put this in a context that it becomes part of our heritage as a nation, not just a developmental process or approaches that we do. Thank you very much for the time that is allocated to me. I'd like to pass it back to you, Izzah.
Thank you, Mr. Harizal, for emphasizing the importance of multidisciplinary approaches, especially for a country like Malaysia, and how we should be leveraging our own strengths and our key interests towards a more sustainable and long-term growth. Next, I shall invite our next speaker, Dr. Hu Chiu Ping, a senior lecturer in Strategic Studies and International Relations in the National University of Malaysia. Dr. Hu, go ahead.
Thank you so much, ISIS Malaysia and Wisma Putra for inviting me to be part of this forum. I very much agree with our foreign minister, Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, on all the outline that he has set forth, and also by the Chief Executive of ISIS Malaysia, Mr. Harizal. So what I would like to add on is to put forward a question. Is Malaysia still a middle power after the global pandemic? So we are being challenged not only by the ravages of the positive cases, but also the challenges in our public health infrastructure. So COVID-19 has forced every nation to reconsider their priority. So what has been highlighted by Datuk Saifuddin and also Mr. Harizal are the right priorities. So I would like to further conceptualize how we can revive Malaysia's importance as a very influential power in the region, in Southeast Asia, and in the larger context of an Indo-Pacific framework. So firstly, I would like to point to the fact that most of the middle powers are activists. Activists in the sense that they would highlight the main virtue and values and principles that matters to the country. So I would like to point to Datuk Saifuddin's former activism in highlighting the plight of Uyghurs in Xinjiang. That is the value of we've placed upon on human rights. And also just now, Mr. Harizal mentioned about the refugees, Rohingya, Palestine, and also very recently, the Afghanistan refugees. So the human rights also shed light on another area that Malaysians seldom talk about, and that is the foreign labor issues. And that is highly related to our economy. So aside from activism, Malaysia should serve as a hub in Southeast Asia, a hub in Indo-Pacific. How so? Firstly, on the economic dimension. In the post-COVID-19, flight has been significantly reduced, and a lot of the goods and services has been transferred by shipping. Maritime shipping is so important, and the Straits of Malacca is becoming more congested than ever. So many delivery are delayed, and the difficulty in procuring flight cargo to ship around the world has put a strain on our maritime traffic. Not only Selat Malacca, but also South China Sea, where we have a lot of shipping route connecting the Northeast Asian countries, also the most vibrant economies such as China, South Korea, and Japan. So our ports are in dire need to be upgraded, and we can make use of some of the capacity building that can be afforded by other countries. So global supply chain is part and parcel of this connectivity. So while other countries, even in landlocked countries such as in Central Asia, they have already come up with their digital connectivity in streamlining how they can overcome the land border restrictions to ensure that life is still going as usual. So this is even more important for Malaysia. We are connected by land via southern Thailand, and sea as our national territories are defined by our very long coastal lines. So how can we enhance this aspect? We not only need to upgrade our physical port facilities, quality of our port management, and also digitalizing our global supply chain. So, and this means cybersecurity is the core of it all. And we have many experts, specialists trained in this regards. So it is time to bring those experts, as Datuk Saifuddin and also Mr. Harizal has mentioned earlier. So we need not only the engineers, the public health specialists and medical doctors, nurses, we also need people who are specialized in public policy, such as the many researchers based in ISIS Malaysia, but also all the brains and talent pools that we can attract. Many Malaysians holder of prestigious degree from all around the world. And it is time we call upon their expertise to help building Malaysia again in the post-pandemic era. In terms of foreign policy, aside from human rights, just now our distinguished panelist has already highlighted SDG. Sustainable development is also key to economic growth. So we need not only the digitalization component of how to do so. For instance, the Smart Cities project that ASEAN countries have been trying to promote since before the pandemic. So this project is now becoming more important than ever to be materialized. And aside from that, other countries such as South Korea has already introduced policies such as the Green New Deal and Digital New Deal, aiming to create jobs when many people has lost their job and the high rate of unemployment in many countries around the world. So it is time we cultivate talents and also create space and employment opportunities in this area that can help us not only to overcome the challenges of pandemic, but also to help domestic economic development. So Malaysia can be the leading voice as well in the traditional and non-traditional security issues. Just now, South China Sea has been mentioned several times. It is not only about US-China rivalry. More importantly, is the users of these international waters. So maritime economy has great potential. And yet again, we are unable to resolve the issues of unregulated and illegal fishing in this area. The fish stock has been pushing southern, which is very close to Malaysian shores. So rightfully, maritime security is an issue that requires not only the fishing department's attention, but also Wisma Putra, Prime Minister Office, the Maritime Enforcement Agency, and many more. So I would like to also highlight how we can further acting in the activist capacity in foreign policy. In terms of disarmament, Malaysia has become one of the first 50 countries in the world to sign on Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, in short TPNW. So we can actually be a leading voice on disarmament issues. So recently I was just participating in the UNODA, United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, as the only Malaysian and only Southeast Asian speakers on the panel. A lot of Western countries are actually interested in studying how Southeast Asian nuclear weapons free zone can be an example for further denuclearization effort and also disarmament. So we also attain high praise from other research institutes based in Washington, DC, that our Malaysia's Strategic Track Act performed much better than our neighboring country in terms of dual-use technology import-export control. So in that way, we can contribute and lead in these efforts. Last but not least, I would like to highlight the interagency coordination and cooperation within Malaysia. I am currently working with my PhD student in highlighting the 3 Ps: public, private, and people. So of course, the government as the leader in leading various national efforts. Right now, we also see that in private sectors, big corporations are dominating once again the international exchanges. And that includes vaccine-making companies such as Pfizer. In our country, Petronas has moved forward towards renewable energy research and also transition. So that also requires the support of the civil societies and NGOs. When people need the assistance from the government and the delivery was slowed due to many obstacles, NGOs are the ones that step up and provide the help much needed by the B40 level of the society. And the big corporation, small or medium, they are supposed to be strengthened in terms of capacity to attract investment. And that we need government's framework to help promote this. Don't scare the investors away. And we should try to connect with countries that have the most confidence in us. South Korea has opened many new stores over the course of pandemic in Malaysia and set up a cultural center and such. And there are more plans, new institutes that try to open in Malaysia. So we should work closer with countries that still have confidence in Malaysia and make us a more attractive destination in the post-pandemic world. Thank you so much.
sorry, is, sorry, can you hear me now? There was a slight,
Yep, it's good.
yeah, sorry about that. There was a slight internet connectivity issue.
Okay, folks, I will jump in. I think Izzah is having a bit of a connectivity problem. Thank you so much, Dr. Koo, for your remarks. I'm going to now call on the next speaker, Dr. Roy Anthony Rogers. He's a senior lecturer at the Department of International and Strategic Affairs at the University of Malaya. Dr. Roy, you have the floor for 10 minutes, sir.
All right, thank you, Thomas. A very good morning and salam sejahtera to the Honorable Foreign Minister yang berbahagia Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, Mr. Harizal Hasri, Executive Director of ISIS Malaysia, fellow panelists yang berbahagia Datuk Dr. Anis Yusof, Dr. Ho Chui Ping, our moderator and co-moderator, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In international relations, diplomacy can be defined as the effort by states to influence action of other states. In addition, diplomacy can be also defined as peaceful handling of relations between states through official representation. Diplomacy has four main functions, namely conducting negotiation at the international level, acting as the official representative of the state, helping to gather information beyond national borders, and working for the advancement of national interests abroad. All states in the world establish foreign relations with other countries and send delegates or diplomats to manage national interests beyond their national borders. The practice of diplomacy is not a new phenomenon, which can be traced back to ancient civilization, as earlier on Datuk mentioned about cultural diplomacy. In West Asia, China, India, and Europe, and for example, in the 15th century, Malacca Sultanate had contacts with the Ming Dynasty, the Kingdom of Majapahit, and Siam. However, during the colonial era, foreign relations of Malaya were managed by the colonial authorities. When Malaysia, or Malaya at that time, achieved independence in 1957, as we are still in the mood of Merdeka, Malaysia had only 7 missions, namely in London, to the United Kingdom, Washington, D.C., to the United States of America, in New York, the United Nations, Canberra to Australia, Jakarta to Indonesia, New Delhi to India, and Bangkok to Thailand. But today, Malaysia currently, we have already 110 diplomatic missions and 1 center for friendship and trade. So we can see how it has advanced in our Malaysia's foreign policy. COVID-19, as earlier on Datuk Saifuddin and the other panelists have mentioned, has seriously impact on all states. The world has to adapt to the new norms that arose as a result of COVID-19. Almost all aspects of human life have been affected by the impact of COVID-19, and this includes diplomacy. In the face of COVID-19 pandemic, diplomacy has become even more important than ever, as no single country is able to cope to the crisis arising from COVID-19 pandemic. However, most of the discussions, dialogues have shifted from face-to-face to online. International organizations, whether universal in nature, such as the UN, IMF, World Bank, or regional, example, ASEAN and the EU, have held conferences online. With the online diplomacy, many centuries-old protocol need to be revisited. In the post-COVID-19 era, online will be part of the new norms in diplomacy. There is already a term called hybrid diplomacy, which is a combination of traditional methods of diplomacy, namely face-to-face, with digital and involving states and non-state actors. Ladies and gentlemen, digital diplomacy can be defined as the use of internet and communication for an information technology to achieve the functions of diplomacy. Digital technology revolution has allowed diplomats to communicate through various means such as email, SMS, WhatsApp, Zoom, like what we are having currently, Facebook, Skype, Instagram, and Twitter. The use of digital diplomacy became more relevant as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the use of digital diplomacy is not a new phenomenon, as in 2002, the United States Department of State established a task force on e-diplomacy and later upgraded it to the Office of E-Diplomacy. Other countries, through their representative or through their ministries, have also do not want to be left behind, except digital diplomacy. For example, the United Kingdom has set up a special office to identify digital matters under the UK and Commonwealth Office. Therefore, it may be timely for the Malaysian Foreign Ministry or Wisma Putra, currently under the leadership of Yang Berbahagia Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah, to consider setting up a special section to handle digital diplomacy issues in line with the current needs and challenges. So the question is, what are the advantages of digital diplomacy where more and more states are attracted to it? Digital diplomacy facilitates and speeds up communication. Information can be sent immediately by pressing send button. In addition, cyber diplomacy allows information in the form of pictures, statistics, charts, maps, videos, and audio recordings to be sent and downloaded quickly, easily compared to traditional diplomacy. This makes easier for diplomats when negotiating with clearer information. Digital diplomacy also reduces security risks for diplomats tasked with obtaining information in dangerous zones, conflict zones, through Zoom, Skype, Google Meet. Diplomats and leaders can consult with conflicting parties and obtain information from military without being on location. Ladies and gentlemen, most foreign ministries, including Wisma Putra, already have its own Facebook page to inform the public on issues related to Malaysia's foreign policy. This is also part of the effort of a state to make foreign policy more transparent, to be closer and to be more open and to be closer to the people. Digital diplomacy is becoming increasingly popular, used by world leaders such as Joe Biden, Tayyip Erdogan, Imran Khan, Narendra Modi, including religious leaders like Pope Francis and the Dalai Lama. The COVID-19 pandemic has also contributed to the use of digital diplomacy because leaders could not cross borders to meet physically. International conferences, as I mentioned earlier on, such as the 75th United Nations General Assembly in New York in September 2020, were held virtually, as well as the 37th ASEAN Conference in Hanoi in November was also held online. However, it should be emphasized, this does not mean digital diplomacy is free from limitations. And I think Datuk Saifuddin earlier on have also mentioned about the issue of cybersecurity. So among them are information in internet that can be hacked, then exposed to the public and cause embarrassment. In addition, false information or fake news can be spread through social media, which can affect states' relations with other states. Digital diplomacy can also cause states to spend more money to enhance their cybersecurity, to reduce the risk of being hacked. It is noteworthy to mention in my last ending remark, it is timely for the international community, including Malaysia, to suggest to the United Nations perhaps to revise or amend the international law, such as the 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, to incorporate digital diplomacy in line with the current challenges. With that, thank you very much. Terima kasih. Stay safe.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roy, for your very insightful elaboration on the adaptations that we have to make towards diplomacy, and especially towards adopting the digital world as in light of COVID-19. And now I'll invite our last speaker, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Dr. Anis Yusof, Principal Research Fellow of the Institute of Ethnic Studies in the National University of Malaysia. Take it away.
Thank you, Izzah. YB Minister, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning to all. I must thank my friend Harizal Asri, the Chief Executive ISIS, for inviting me to join ISIS.Forum this morning. If Harizal said just now it's difficult to speak after the YB Minister, imagine speaking after 4 speakers. I think everything that I want to say has been said. Having said that, I think let me be the devil's advocate. I think the YB Minister knows this. I always come with a different perspective about things. Let us forget about our foreign policy priorities for the time being, because whatever policies we want to put in place, it will influence how people perceive us. But if we are not able to address at home, then whatever policies we put is meaningless. I think we have to look at things within our control. So I want to look at 4 key areas, if I may, maybe. I want to look at politics, I want to look at economy, I want to look at health, and I want to look at education. If we look at let's assume that someone from abroad, somebody, let's assume that all of us are now somewhere out there and looking in to Malaysia. If we look at our political situation in the country, I think we can safely say that yes, we have a new Prime Minister, but I don't think we have a political stability as the politician would wish, in terms of having greater control and things like that. People are still debating, for example, on the issue whether the Prime Minister needs to go through a vote of confidence and things like this. And whatever have been debated out there doesn't help the common people because it just continue to act with confusion. Now, if we look at the economic situation in the country, yes, business has started to open in phases. Many economic indicators, I was looking at all the economic indicators showing good growth. But for the ordinary folks, I think the key economic indicators is meaningless to them if they cannot put food on the table, if they cannot ensure their children get education, regardless whether they go to school or at home. Now we have to provide gadgets and things like that. And for them to have access to transportation, for them to go out and do work. So, and this is important for us to gain trust for investors who want to come and invest in Malaysia again. And I think that's key. Now, let me just quickly move to the health situation in the country. If we look at health, yes, we were told that we are number 1 in vaccination rate. We even surpassed US. But if we look at the WHO dashboard, I was just looking at the WHO to compare us with few countries. And I purposely took India and Indonesia with the kind of population that they have now. India, 2 days ago, on the 5th of September, or a few days ago, recorded 219 deaths, and they are 43 times more our population. Indonesia, our near neighbor, recorded 612 deaths, and they are 10 times more population. And we, on the same day, recorded 336. Whatever being said, I think there are issues for us to be concerned here. And this is how people will perceive us, regardless of what we want to say. And then finally, let's look at education. I've written a lot about this, about the lost generation, about quality of education. Now, if people in the foreign land read the things that many of us have been writing about this issue, and I know, I mean, YB used to hate KKMM, and he knows the issue of connectivity better than any one of us in this room. If we push for this PDPR, pembelajaran dan pengajaran di rumah, we don't know whether all the kids out there have the access to education. And this is real. I've been to the rural part of Kanawit to see that connectivity issue is still real. And what more for them to have gadgets and to, you know, OECD came up with a standard that in order for this kind of PDPR to work, you need to have at least 87% of the students to have their own equipment. Finland recorded 94% of their students to have equipment of their own. I have a friend who is a teacher who told me in his class, out of 34 students, 7 has their own, they have their own gadget. Another 7 have to share with the other siblings. If their siblings are important class from 5 or so, priority given to that. And there are others who have to wait for their parents to come home. So this is a real issue that we need to look at, and that's how people will perceive us. So just by looking at these 4 areas, a foreigner would form an opinion about Malaysia, regardless how we want to be an international player in terms of our policy. Only on these 4, although I think YB Minister knows my pet subject is actually governance, and I don't want to go there. Because if we look at governance and the problem, especially if there are cases, I mean, there are reported cases or news coming out where some corruption cases have been dropped and things. Those things doesn't help with the image that we want to build for this Malaysia that we want. That narrative will cause us a bit of a problem. Now, of course, you know, I don't want to be seen as you know, the bearer of the bad news, as the devil's advocate. I thought I just want to bring us back to some fundamental issues, and at the risk of not going to be invited ever again by ISIS to this kind of forum, let me give some good news, and then we will go back to that. So the good news is, YB, is about academic diplomacy, and I'm happy to report to you that UKM, kita, will be launching the Global Malaysian Studies Network tomorrow. The idea of this network is to revive, you know, we used to have the Malaysian Studies chair in few countries abroad. We had in Leiden, we had in Ohio, in New Zealand, at Wellington, in Beijing, and in Hankook. So to revive all that, and to help create awareness and understanding about Malaysia, especially its history, multiculturalism, and heritage. And this is the thing that we were talking about. So with a vision to create a richer and balanced perspective of Malaysia across the world through a networking platform, but based on evidence-based research work. So here is a way of how we can convince people, because this is not a spin doctors that trying to, you know, come up with stories, but real evidence of the work. So it's academic diplomacy. So GMSN makes its mission to showcase Malaysian studies based on empirical evidence. To achieve this vision, GMSN builds a collaboration, a network with academic institutions and think tanks, both locally and internationally. And by sharing resources, the institutions are able to pool resources and expertise to tackle issues at our time. Now, to date, we just started sometime in June this year. We have 5 international partners and 5 local partners, if I can mention, just to share. We have the Australian National University that have partnered with us, the Ohio University, the Goethe University at Frankfurt, University of Cambridge, and University of Pennsylvania. And the local agencies that have partnered with us, of course, ISIS Malaysia is among the first, Saint-Priest University Science Malaysia, Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs Ideas, Socioeconomic Research Initiative, and Kenanga Investment Bank, a bank who wanted to also participate in this. So that's basically for the time that we have now. Now, allow me then, with the problems that I've created earlier, to suggest 4 of perhaps 5 suggestions. One is that GMSN, we would like to very much to work with Wisma Putra on content development. I think that is the key thing. It's almost like I want to throw a spanner in the the framework that you have already created. But I think no matter what the framework is, the content will tell the story. And I think we will be able to help in content development. This will help with the narrative that our embassies and High Commission will be able to communicate abroad. I think that's key. I think we need to be the game changers. Otherwise, we will be changed. So we need to gain people's trust, and evidence-based report will gain trust. And I think this is key for us. Point number 2, I think I would like to suggest that our embassies and high coms help us with intel gathering. I'm sure it has been done, but I think we need, especially during this post-COVID or COVID period, we need to learn how countries like New Zealand dealing with. We need to really go deep and understand how they manage, what they did right, so that we can learn. We need the data in order for us, and we can help to analyze some of this data. The third, I think we need to be working closely with the multilateral agencies. For now, I think, although I know many people have been talking, we have to tell them, please forget about SDGs for the time being. We can revisit. No point of us talking about SDGs when there are more important things are not dealt with. So not completely, but we have to work with multilateral agencies to get them to help with the 4 that I mentioned, the situation with economic and plus that one I spoke about, that governance. In fact, that governance becomes so important. When you mentioned just now about ocean, I tried when I was at GICC, we tried to push for ocean governance. The problem is with coordination. You see, if you want to impose ocean governance, there are so many players. People in Wisma Putra dealing with it. People in Home Ministry, there are police, marine. The Navy is doing it. Then the maritime, and then Jabatan Perikanan has their own laws. The Heritage Ministry of Cultural and Tourism also have it's a mess if we are not, and there is no one body to coordinate all that effort. Similarly with cyber security, we've been talking about this, but again, KKMN has one, MKN has a different view, Wisma Putra has a different thing. I remember I attended a briefing on this where all of them came together and I asked them, have you not sat together to discuss this? So the coordination part, and perhaps being a foreign office, foreign ministry can play that role and say, look guys, in order for me to tell the story about Malaysia out, you guys got to coordinate, you guys got to get together and let us work on this. And I think finally, the most important suggestion for foreign policy priorities, and I think the minister is an expert on this subject, is communication. I think we have to communicate and coordinate our efforts and communicate clearly, open all channels, and we have to be transparent. I think if we can manage the 4+1, in fact, that one, priority 1, if governance is priority 1, everything else will fall in place. I think perhaps if you can relook at the framework that you have done, see if you can place governance within that framework, and I'm sure you can have more balance. I think if we deal with that, plus the 4 initiatives which I suggested, I have strong feeling that the Keluarga Malaysia narrative which the PM has started can be a very strong narrative. Family will not leave anyone behind, be it on economy, education, or health. Family will take care of each other, regardless of race, color, or religion. I think that is a strong message from a country like Malaysia. And I remember when I was working with UNDP, people come to Malaysia to learn this, to learn about our national unity, how we manage to live together in a country. Look at Sri Lanka, look at some countries. They grapple with trying to live together, but we were successful. And we have to tell these stories. And I think these are the kind of message that we need to put together. But before we can go out and prioritize our policy, we have to fix our internal issue so that then people, wherever they are, they have access now. This is what Roy was saying. Through digital diplomacy, people come straight to your door and read about things. So you cannot hide by just expecting what your embassies are doing out there, because people will come to the country and the investors will look at all the indices. They will look where we stand in terms of corruption, where we stand in terms of, and before they can decide to come and invest. So these are some of the things I feel that we can consider in order for us to move forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Anis, for your comments. Folks, we have about less than 20 minutes left for the Q&A. Unfortunately, we ate into some of the time, and I don't think I can extend it because there are more things on the agenda after this. So let's jump straight into it. I would remind you to share your questions through the Q&A tabs. We will try to take as much of it as possible. For the first question, this is directed to Dr. Roy, and it's from Shazlina Abidin. The question is, on your point, calling on the UN to revise the Vienna Convention to include digital diplomacy. Shazlina wonders if you could elaborate further, bearing in mind that most of the immunity and privileges are for in-person interactions. And which for articles and sections that are being revised, would you have any suggestions to get the ball rolling on how this can be done? Dr. Roy?
Thank you very much to the question. Thank you, Thomas. You see, the document was composed or was made ready in the early 60s. There was no thought whatsoever about digital diplomacy back then. It was still very much face-to-face diplomacy that was handed down over the centuries. So, like it or not, due to the COVID-19, we have to revise the document, because the fact that diplomacy today is not just managed via face-to-face. So perhaps maybe certain articles in the 1961 Vienna Convention have to include, of course, we can go into in-depth analysis on it. I think that requires maybe a few days, a 2-3 days conference to really dissect the convention and to bring in, to infuse the digital diplomacy. But I think the idea is it needs to be revised so that bringing in digital diplomacy. And another thing which I mentioned also in terms of protocol. In the past, protocol is very much observed in diplomacy, but today when you have non-face-to-face, many of the protocol have to be revisited. For example, sitting and all. In the past, it was a major issue where the door is, where the sitting is, and all. But today, when you have online, these issues may not be as relevant as it used to be. So that is why, in the diplomatic community, we should rethink about what we have been the business as usual and the new business. Thank you. This is just a short answer because, as I said, it requires an in-depth study on which are the areas within the convention that needs to be revised. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. Dr. Hu, do you want to jump in on this, or shall I move on to the next question?
I prefer next question, please.
Okay, excellent. Because the next question is for you, but it's also for YB Foreign Minister. This is from an anonymous question that popped up that I am building on. So, Malaysia has long prided itself on being a neutral, a pragmatic country and a friend for all. But however, the regional order is clearly changing. Even with the world in the grips of a pandemic, strategic rivalry rather than competition is framing the interaction between major powers in this region, especially the US and China. An added challenge for us is that, unlike the Cold War, the majority of the actors are now in our region, and Southeast Asia is going to be a region where these competition for influence takes place. At a time like this, is Malaysia, will Malaysia be willing to stick itself out to make sort of hard decisions for itself, especially during the times of a pandemic? Dr. Hu, maybe you can go first, and then maybe YBFM, if you want to take this as well.
Thank you so much, Thomas. So I think one of the flexibility afforded by our principle is that our neutrality and pragmatism also means that we are highly adaptive. So we can choose even opposite or contradictory policy options as long as they suited to our national interests. So in terms of Southeast Asia, we are now known for not choosing sides, but we are actually at the same time choosing all sides. We still continue to work with the United States, China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand. So there is, so it's counterproductive if we just sit idly or choose one side. So that will incur more damage than functionality. So over to you, Foreign Minister.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I just want to continue from where you just stop your, you see, neutrality is a good and safe policy, but sometimes we also have to have certain threshold as to what extent are we neutral and to what extent are we, or do we want to not necessarily stick out our neck. Being a small player, it need not necessarily be a good way. I'll give an example. Myanmar. There was a time when we were seen to be a leading force when we use constructive engagement with Myanmar. And everyone thought, wow, that was the right thing to do. Today, as part of ASEAN, we are also using constructive engagement. Well, it is already, the policy is done, but then people are now debating whether in this kind of situation, constructive engagement is the right policy to follow. So what I'm trying to say is, I said earlier in my intervention, the fundamentals don't change, but we sometimes have to look at some very specific areas and very specific, probably because of specific events, we may have to have our own standpoint. And even if, I know this is not something that people like to do, even if we say, yes, we are with ASEAN in all of the 5 consensus points on Myanmar, but individually we would like to help Rohingya more, for example. So we have to have that. Otherwise, we will lose our standing as a leading force or a leading voice within the Muslim world, for example.
Thank you, YBFM. It is such an interesting question, and I guess the answers are really fundamentally important because this is going to shape us, and these are tough questions that we need to answer. Mr. Harizal and Dr. Anis, would you like to jump in on this as well?
Sure. Just a very quick one. I think Malaysia's reputation internationally as a trusted partner to look into not just developmental, it used to be very much into developmental sort of narratives, but then also into conflict resolution, peace building, and whatnot. There's actually a brand that is very strong. Actually, I shouldn't use the word brand because it is more than a brand. Malaysia is really considered as to be that nation that is neutral, that is a preferred partner. And I think this is where, echoing for Minister's point, that we are able to prioritize certain things, but at the same time, we will not lose our approaches and our reputation of contributing. That's number one. Secondly, it is also important that the nature of Malaysia's foreign policy, if I may use that term, for the longest time is that our ability to manage the different superpowers or clashes around the world. And it is very clear from the international angle where Malaysia stands. We will continue to protect the interests of our country. We want to create a peace, just and prosperous region, as well as the world, to as much as we can. And I think these are some of the things that we will continue carrying forward, be it that international relations will always have interests, will always have power struggles, But I think because it is so deeply entrenched in Malaysia's tradition of foreign policy, that we will continue to be able to manage this and push our priorities forward. And my last point, I think ideally, and this is picking up from some of my friends' point as well. Ideally, any country in the world would want to have this a complete picture of how we are actually doing well in many of the aspects that will technically relate to our reputation internationally. However, my perspective from a slightly different angle is that we are proud, at least I am proud, in this nation that I really believe in, that we are going through all these struggles and all these challenges, and yet we have maintained a certain level of sanity, and yet we have maintained a certain level of wanting to find a vision and move forward. And I think that is very important because the progress of democracy as well is actually a process, right? And the maturity of democracy is important and it's a process. So we know that nation states can go in many different directions. It can mature or it can regress. In the case of my beloved nation, despite the challenges, which I think is normal because it is the process of maturity, we are showing signs that we are actually moving towards something that we all aspire to, which is becoming a stronger and more resilient nation. So that's my response to the question. Thank you.
If I can add, and just to support Mr. Harizal's point about being the trusted nation, I think we are, an example in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, national unity. I remember Sudan thought when before they broke into the two sides, engaged Malaysia to go and negotiate and help to mediate the situation. So I see that kind of role, things that we have done well and we will continue to do. And I think we need to see the niche area where Malaysia can really be used in the international arena. I think that's where I thought the multilateral agencies can be an agency to help promote some of these good practices and good example that Malaysia can showcase to the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anis. Much appreciated for your input. We have about 5 minutes left. So let me jump to something that the foreign minister mentioned about cultural diplomacy. We have a question here from Hafiza Hassan. Hafiza talks about how South Korea portrays, how South Korea has done cultural diplomacy really well. And she mentions K-pop diplomacy, which I think Dr. Hu knows a lot about, so I might tap her on for that. But the question really is that, where are we in Malaysia positioned in this context? Do we have a short-term plan or do we need better long-term plans? I wonder if I can get Dr. Hu to respond to this, but also YBFM, if you would like to elaborate more of your thoughts on cultural diplomacy. It's not something that it's not something that the foreign policy establishment has traditionally talked about, so it would be great to hear a lot more about this. Dr. Hu, first, please.
Thank you so much, Thomas. So I think public diplomacy is inherently part of any Ministry of Foreign Affairs around the world. So cultural diplomacy, as Dato' Saifuddin and also Mr. Harizal has emphasized, it is not just limited to tourism. So cultural includes many aspects of a country, including what we have branded before Malaysia, truly Asia, uniquely Malaysia. So aside from the local culture that is made up of multi-ethnic, we also produce local films, music, arts, and especially Islamic arts. So all of these aspects can be promoted online right now, so in the digital medium. So what Dr. Roy has been mentioning about the digital diplomacy is actually one of the channel and the main channel to be used. For example, South Korean government have a channel on their Ministry of Foreign Affairs YouTube and website to actively promote Korean cultures, history. So the same can be done in Malaysia as well. So we can even offer courses to global audience for anyone who wants to know more about the history, the culture, and the society. and also offer some packages when travels are allowed, then they can take on discounted packages to visit Malaysia and such. So in many ways, public diplomacy can also contribute to national economy in that way.
Thank you, Dr. Hu. YB?
Yeah, on cultural diplomacy, earlier this morning, I have alluded to the point that it is not limited to tourism and and not over commercialization of culture. Definitely, we have to talk about history, heritage, civilization. Well, we can think of making Kuala Lumpur as a hub of something. I know this is already in the pipeline in the immediate past government. Now I have to be very careful talking about which government I'm referring to. So the immediate past government was already talking about a cultural Malaysia or Kuala Lumpur as a hub of Islamic culture of sorts. But if I were to go to seni budaya specifically, then if you talk about music, then you have to, aspire to win the Grammy. But Grammy is not something that you win easily. It's not just about producing good music. There is the lobbying part, and this is where Malawakil comes into play. The road to Oscar, as I was alluding to when I was in my previous ministry, is not just about a good movie, but winning lobbying the Oscar fraternity involve years. I mean, we know Korea won Parasite won Oscar. Yes, it was a good movie, good casting and whatnot, but the lobbying to win, to ensure that Parasite won the Oscar last year or 2 years ago, started before Parasite was produced. Years of work by Korean ambassadors overseas. They don't go straight to Oscar. Okay. We can emulate what the Korean has been doing and Indonesia has been doing. So, I mean, there is two specific example on specific arts. But we are already considered the home of contemporary nasyid. I only know this when I was in charge of the last ministry, that nasyid singers and producers around the globe, they actually look at Malaysia, and Malaysia has been producing good nasyid, and we can actually, we have the right, we can make the rightful claim to be, well, at least I have declared last time that Malaysia is the home for contemporary nasyid, and that is one product. And when you talk about nasyid, it's not just the song. It's the song, it's the costume that people wear, the busana, and the halal product that comes straight. It's a world. It's just like rock. Rock is not just the song, it's the style, the hairstyle, and the dressing, and all the other brandings that come together with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Okay, folks, we have actually...
Sorry, Thomas, can I have an extra 1 minute?
Okay.
And using my position to impose this on you.
No, of course, impose away, boss.
And yeah, you're smiling because you can't really say no to that. I'm so sorry. No, so sorry, YB, to sort of like expand it. I really think that this is a very important thing, cultural diplomacy. But I want to expand a little bit from Foreign Minister's very excellent points. Is that, and when I say this, I'm throwing this back to every one of us. This is no longer just about Wisma Putra. This is no longer just about, Yang Berhormat Foreign Minister trying to promote Malaysia outside. But this is really imposed on us. Every one of us ourselves and see how we can contribute. And I'd like to throw this out on the table. When we talk about culture, a lot of us focus about performances, which is fine, because this is also, an avenue where we basically promote something that is Malaysian. But on a different side, culture is larger than performances. Culture is really who we are. And I'd like to bring the point that was brought up by Dr. Anis earlier on education, for instance. We need to promote that kind of culture for people to understand where Malaysia is and our depth and our interest in looking at issues and studying. We need to promote the culture of us, of every Malaysian, that a lot of ministries have been doing before, Truly Malaysia, this and that. But how is it that we turn that into culture? We remember this in the past when I grew up remembering the Japanese discipline and hardworking as to be a culture, for instance. And this is where I'm throwing it back to every one of us, including myself. What are these cultures that we as Malaysians are proud of? And this responsibility is beyond Wisma Putra. This responsibility is beyond ISIS. This responsibility is on every one of us. And this is what I would like to expand on. And I put it out there because it's a big thing. Promotion of it is one side of the story. And of course, under the able hands of Datuk Saifuddin, there many can be done. But really the content of it, the depth of it, every one of us, academia, the research culture, the conversations, the knowledge that we have and what we want to share. And all of those should be Malaysian culture. Thank you.
Can I misuse my power? Of
course, it seems to be a trend. Go for it, boss. Go for it.
Can I also just speak for?
I just want to wrap up what Harizal and also what Anis has said earlier in one line. In actual fact, foreign policy begins at home. That's what it is. I mean, people in Wisma Putra can go and shout and say all the good things about Malaysia, but people will see. So it is really about what we do at home. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may just add a bit more.
Sure, Roy.
I'm not your boss, Thomas. Don't worry.
No, sorry, Roy. Just give me 1 second. I'll give you a minute.
We already have the platform in terms of cultural diplomacy. I can't help but to think of, we have relations with the Holy See, for example. This can use it as to encourage Christian-Islam dialogue, part of this cultural diplomacy, which is not just confined within culture of dance, but to enhance Christian-Muslim dialogue. And as Harizal mentioned, it's not just a Wisma Putra concern, but we can solicit scholars, Islamic scholars, to promote this Christian-Muslim dialogue through our office in the Holy See, because we have diplomatic relations with the Holy See established 10 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. It would be remiss of me not to give an opportunity to Dr. Hu and Dr. Anis to sort of conclude as well. Let me throw this to the both of you. If there is one very succinct thing that you want the audience, not just the audience, but that you want the foreign minister to take away from this discussion, so what would that be? Very, very briefly. Maybe Dr. Hu, you can go first.
Thank you. So I saw a question from the audience about how cultural diplomacy can solve COVID-19 problem. So I think the value that we can take away from Asian countries, especially resilience, health safety norms like mask wearing, and also taking care of our mental health. We have done so much in this area, and I think these are the values that can be exported to other countries while we are learning from the best practices from countries like New Zealand, South Korea, and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hu.
I think I've achieved my objective because the FM already sum up foreign policy starts at home. That was the message that I wanted.
Okay, excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for indulging us today morning, for indulging us, about nearly 10 minutes beyond our end time. We do appreciate the attendance and participation of the Foreign Minister and of our four speakers today morning. We do apologize that we couldn't attend to all your questions, but such is the nature of an online forum. We wish you a good day and do stay safe. Thank you very much, everyone.
you.